things I did when I got my very first job in 1990 was begin saving money for a TurboGrafx 16. This little 16-bit system that had been released in Japan in 1987 by NEC had been spoken of highly in magazines and other media that I read and listened to. I had been impressed by the many arcade-style games the system had, and it was the first video game system to have a CD-ROM attachment. I had loved games like Splatterhouse and Legendary Axe, and while the Sega Genesis remained my #1 choice for gaming, the Turbo provided me many hours of great gaming in between Sega's big hitters. By 1992, I had been drawn to many of the TurboGrafx CD-ROM releases though. Games like East Book 1 and 2 and Gate of Thunder had received a ton of attention in the press, and I decided that it was time to make the jump to the new Super CDROM2 format. There was a combination unit on the market by then known as the Turbo Duo, which could play both turbo chips and new Super CDROM2 games. I sold my vanilla TurboGrafx, saved up some money, and scored me a brand new Turbo Duo in early 1993. It was a great addition to my growing stable of game systems, and much like my Genesis and Super Nintendo, I turned my attention to the Japanese market for games I couldn't get anywhere else. This would of course lead me straight into the announcement that Konami was working on an exclusive Castlevania for the PC Engine Super CD-ROM2 format. Needless to say, I was excited as hell. So in late 1993, I imported me a copy of the Japanese release, Devil's Castle Dracula X, Rondo of Blood. By this time, I had played 3 NES Castlevanias, the Game Boy Castlevanias, and Super Castlevania 4 on the Super Nintendo. I had already been exposed to great level design, great graphics, great music, and great atmosphere. What could this game possibly add to make it stand out among the already excellent list of accomplishments for this particular series? As it turns out, quite a bit. The game opens up with a brand new protagonist in the Belmont lineage, Richter, on his way to rescue his beloved Annette from the evil clutches of Dracula's henchmen. The Grim Reaper shows up to slow you down, and so the adventure begins. Konami decided that it was time to bring back multiple routes from Castlevania 3. But take it even a step further in this release. Many of the game's stages feature multiple routes to take, which can even mean completely different boss battles at the end of the stage. The very first stage in the game features 2 completely different routes to take, as well as 2 different battles at the end. Since these routes were often hidden, this immediately added a sort of exploration element to the experience. You were whipping everything in the hopes of finding something new. You even took risks by falling into holes hoping for a new area. Also, much like Castlevania 3, we'd see the addition of more than one playable character. This comes in the form of a 12-year-old girl named Maria, who herself has special powers to aid in the battle against Dracula's minions. You must rescue her first, however, one of 4 hidden maidens that have been kidnapped and hidden throughout the game. These hidden characters must be found to get the best ending as well. From a graphic standpoint, Konami outdid themselves with this release. An incredibly unfair narrative had dogged the PC Engine and TurboGrafx in North America. Because the main CPU that drove the hardware was 8-bit, it was often seen as inferior to its contemporaries. This of course was complete bullshit, and Dracula X here shows exactly how good a 16-bit game could look on the system. Multiple levels of parallax scrolling, awesome color use, lots of new art assets, and genre-leading animation define this powerhouse visual presentation. The sheer variety of it all impressed as well, as each stage looked and felt very distinct and always looked better than the one before it. So good was its enemy sprite work, this would be the foundation for many of the Castlevania games that would follow it, including its direct sequel, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. These characters were well drawn, well animated, and had an appeal that was instantly recognizable within the universe. Frankly, anyone that had badmouthed the hardware of the PC Engine only need look at this release to shut down that ridiculous drivel. No Castlevania would be complete without a beast soundtrack to accompany it. This being the very first game in the series released on the CD-ROM format meant that Konami could use Red Book audio to enhance things, and good lord did they do just that. Each Castlevania before this wowed me with its musical score. Castlevania 3 had redefined 8-bit music on the NES. Super Castlevania 4 had done the same for 16-bit musical composition. and what Dracula X Rondo of Blood did for the argument for games being on the CD-ROM format was nothing short of spectacular. Every arrangement here did what Castlevania music was meant to do: capture a feeling and atmosphere to assist the visuals, and convey it to the gamer in one rock-solid narrative that would run the gamut of emotions during the experience. The rock synth mix fit every stage in cinema like a glove, and even popular selections from previous Castlevania games would return remixed and sounding better than ever. Many times I'd hear the argument against CD-ROM based systems during this area as it only adding music to what could have been done on a cartridge. This, my friends, was a game that pushed back on that, showing that just adding CD music could be transformative to an overall experience. As with the previous 16-bit installment Super Castlevania 4, Dracula X here would tweak some gameplay elements to make its own unique experience. Gone is the freedom of the multi-directional whip attacks, but Richter is given some powerful moves in its place. The first and most basic is the ability to backflip. This move seems feeble upon first glance, but it's actually a really good way to avoid the faster enemy attacks. It also allows Richter more height in his jumps, useful if you've fallen off something you didn't intend to. The second more obvious trick is Richter's ability to do what is called an item crash, or a more powerful version of your sub-weapon attack. It costs loads more hearts, but often can hit enemies many times for more damage. Placed correctly, some can even wreck the strongest enemies in seconds. You also don't have to worry about picking up the wrong secondary weapon by mistake anymore, with Dracula X allowing you to pick back up any sub-weapon changed by accident. Of course, Maria has a completely different set of attacks than Richter. She has her own ending as well, making her inclusion a much appreciated addition that extends the gameplay. Once you beat the game, you then have access to any stage you want, at any time, allowing you to practice those harder stages or finally seeing the best ending. What all that means in the end is that Dracula X Rondo of Blood would immediately become my favorite PC Engine game by a wide margin. It's a combination of presentational excellence, content above and beyond your typical action game, and gameplay honed to damn near perfection. If you do not have access to a PC Engine or TurboGrafx to play this gem, it was also remade for the PSP, and was recently released for the PS4 as part of the Castlevania Requiem pack, that also includes its sequel, Symphony of the Night. There are some great games in the Castlevania universe. Many were some of the more impressive audio and visual examples for whatever system it was on. Dracula X Rondo of Blood just doesn't fit into that category, but also reigns at the top of it. I do not say that lightly, as the PC Engine had many great games, but when it comes to action platformers, there's Dracula X, and then there's everything else. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.